What is going on YouTube? Gabs here and welcome to episode 32 of the Tech Pills bi-weekly live stream. Welcome everyone and thanks for joining. So let's start off with first news of today. The Manjaro Pinephone pre-orders are live, finally. So the pre-orders for the newest version of the Pinephone with the Manjaro, it's the Manjaro Community Edition. So it's basically the same hardware we've already seen time and time again. The only big difference is that it comes with like a branded Manjaro back cover, and of course it comes pre-installed with Manjaro Linux. Pre-orders are open as of yesterday, September the 17th, and yeah, I mean it's still the old same Pinephone, and we also have again the the more powerful option with 3 GB of RAM and 30 GB of internal eMMC storage. And it comes with the convergence pack. If you don't remember, this thing started like with the last post-Market OS edition of the Pinephone, and it comes in at about $50 more than the regular Pinephone, but it also has like these upgraded specs, so 3 GB of RAM instead of 2, and 32 GB of internal eMMC storage instead of just 16. And it also comes bundled with this USB Type-C, I guess, dock thing. It's a dongle. It's a USB Type-C dongle that you can use with whatever device supports, I mean, whatever protocols you would need to use with that. So it supports the dongle itself, it supports display out via HDMI and Ethernet, and has a couple of USB ports. So nothing too fancy. Still, I mean, it's probably an excuse to just let you use the thing with a monitor, keyboard, and mouse, and give you some sort of a convergence experience. So it's probably more meant to like let people actually try this thing out in convergence mode and let developers actually play around with it. So I guess that's a nice idea. Anyway, it's the same two options. So the base option comes in at about $150, and the convergence pack comes in at $200. And I have something to announce here. I finally pulled the trigger and I got the this edition of the Pinephone. So I bought it yesterday, and it will come at some point, I guess. I know that shipping is a little bit slow, and so I guess a month and a half from now, I will have the Pinephone in my hands, and of course, expect some videos on it. And I'm a developer, and I am super interested in developing for this platform, for the Mobile Linux platform. If you know me already, you know that I have already been developing lots of GTK apps that are responsive and that can run on Linux phones. The GUI is specifically designed to be responsive and usable on a mobile device. So hopefully I will be able to finally use my apps on a phone as well. And if I find any bugs, of course, any issues or whatever that I have to fix in order to make the experience better on my apps, that's also a plus. And maybe I will also write some more apps for this phone. I mean, once I have it in my hands and I find something that I want or something that I'm missing, I'll just probably write an app for it. So I mean, that's great. I'm so happy I bought this phone, even though the only thing that really stopped me from buying a Pinephone up to this point have been the specs, but I guess I'll have to live with it. I just really want a proper phone that I can use in my day-to-day life, that I can actually feel like it's really in my control, you know? So yeah, I wanted it, and I just said, whatever, $200, I'm just gonna buy it. It's gonna be a little more than a toy, but still, whatever. I just really want it. I just want to really play around with it and see what the experience is like, and possibly start using it as my daily driver. I will do my best to. Still, I don't know how possible that will be. Anyway, there's a side story to this whole Pinephone small little story about the Manjaro edition. The Pine64 store also got hacked. Yeah, that's not too nice. Anyway, it's not anything too serious. So the Pine64 store got hacked through a faulty WordPress plugin. Apparently, it was a bot scanning for vulnerabilities to place scam pages. As far as we know, user information has not been exposed, thankfully, and there shouldn't have been any consequences for this attack. Let's have a look at the chat before I go on with my rant. Marius Elvenwood says, what app do you find most useful on a Linux-based phone? I guess the question here would really be, what app would you find useful, do you find most useful on a phone, period? Because it's true that it's going to be a Linux phone, but it's still a phone. So my base point from my experience, from what I want from this kind of device, is being able to do the same things that I do on my phone, and I don't really do much with my phone, but also being able to do some of the things that I do on my desktop, and that's very valuable to me. So so the first thing that I really need from a phone is entertainment. So YouTube, Netflix, maybe. I don't know if that will be possible. I think it will be possible, but anyway, maybe via the browser. And let's see here. So as far as entertainment goes, the only other thing I can think about is Reddit, because yeah, I'm one of those people that lurks Reddit. It really has a bad rap, but once you know how to filter out all the crap, it's not all that bad. And as far as any other thing goes, on my phone, I need Telegram the most. I use that all the time to message with my friends and family and with my girlfriend. So I'd say that's a must, but the current Telegram desktop app for Linux is written in Qt. I have no reason to believe that it won't run on a Pinephone. I think it will run perfectly, also because the interface is actually responsive itself. So I don't think I will have any problems on that front. And other apps that I need, well, I need to be able to make phone calls. And also, I mean, the terminal is one of those things that I really do use all day, all time. And I do have a terminal on my Android phone. I have Termux, I think it's called. It's basically just a terminal for Android that also gives you like the apt package manager. It's all containerized in a way, so it's not like you're really doing anything to the underlying operating system, but you still have apt, the apt package manager. If you're familiar with Ubuntu or Debian, you probably know that already. And you have some packages in their own repos, like, I don't know, Python, Vim, UFetch, Tmux, SSH, whatever. It's a really useful piece of software. Still, it's not like the whole complete deal, because you're still inside the sandbox. You're still limited to what you can do, and it's not like the best. It's workable, but on the Pinephone, I think I will be able to have a more complete experience, because at the end of the day, it's gonna run the same operating system I run on my desktop. So I don't see any reason why it should have any limitation. So yeah, I mean, having the terminal on a proper Linux device is a very powerful thing. And if you're someone that works with like this kind of stuff, you're probably gonna enjoy using the terminal on a Pinephone or a similar Linux phone. Anyway, let's move on to what I was saying before. So I was talking about the attack to the Pine64 website. And I wanted to talk about WordPress in general and the use of this kind of piece of software for doing basically anything on the internet these days. It's going to be a little bit of a rant, so I apologize in advance, but I just really want to talk about this. So WordPress, I think it's probably the single most popular platform to create websites of any kind at this day and age. WordPress is a very old but still actively maintained open source blog engine. It's a blog engine. There are a huge amount of web stores in particular that seem to just love to use a blog engine like WordPress for processing payments and purchases. Of course, there are quite a lot of differences between a blog and a web store, as you can probably imagine. And so, of course, the way this is handled is through plugins. And WordPress has long had a problem with plugins. Plugins are, for WordPress, are basically extensions to the actual code base of the software, and they can do basically whatever they want. And of course, the quality and of the actual plugins is far worse compared to the core code base. And WordPress itself, it's a huge piece of software, and it does have bugs. And of course, if you follow like the releases of WordPress, it's not like you're gonna have much of a problem here. But the story is a little bit different with plugins. There are lots of different plugins to do the same thing, and many of them have vulnerabilities. And I don't know how the situation is with updates. I know that at least up to when I last used WordPress, if you had to update plugins, you had to do it manually, and there was some breakage sometimes, and it had to be compatible with the version of WordPress. So it's a bad, it's not a good user experience. And most importantly, for the kind of people that are using WordPress, I'm talking about non-techie people, like people that know their way around making like a WordPress website, but that don't quite understand how important it is to update their computer or update their software. And so they just install these pieces of software, install these plugins, and just let them be forever. I'm not saying that this is the situation with Pine64. I know that they're smart people and they do care about security and privacy and all this kind of stuff. So I'm sure that if they were able, I mean, if those bots were able to break into the Pine64 store, there was a reason beyond the actual care that Pine64 puts into their website or their web store or whatever. What I'm talking about here is, in general, the problem with using WordPress and plugins in particular to run something as sensitive as a web store. It's a website where people put their credit card information in, or they connect their PayPal to. So it's a very sensitive piece of software, and I personally don't think that using a plugin, a third-party plugin written by who knows who, for processing payments, for processing purchases on a blog engine, it's just a bad idea. And this is like it's not the first time that something like this happens. And WordPress has long had this problem with security and with plugins, and with people not updating their plugins, and with software vulnerabilities, and it's just terrible. just to be honest with you, I don't know what happened here, but that's the reality of where we're at here. Many web stores, a lot of web stores, do run on WordPress. Suffice to say, let me give you my 2 cents on this whole idea. It's not a good idea, period. It's not a good idea. Using a crusty WordPress plugin to run a business, it's not what you do. Okay, so let's take a step back a little bit here. So to be fair, it's not easy to find a good web store engine that ticks all the boxes. And I know this from personal experience. Many are closed source. They do work, and they're probably better than this hell show or whatever. But they're closed source, they're proprietary, and you can many times you cannot even host them yourself. So they're not really viable for many businesses to use. And the ones that you can self-host are usually a pain to deal with in the first place and suffer many times from the same plugin swamp or whatever, the same plugin swamp problem that WordPress has. So honestly, at this point, to be honest, I'd be far happier to have people use proprietary solutions than what we currently have. So I'd prefer people to actually go ahead and pay for a proprietary web store or whatever instead of using these bad solutions, because they're just plain bad. I mean, I'm sure that WordPress is fine for running a blog or whatever, but for anything else, I don't think so. A web store is too much of a sensitive target to just run on WordPress and on plugins. What I do hope at this point is that a sane group of people will at some point just join forces and create a sane open source web store engine that works, so we can put a stop to whatever this mess is. I don't personally think that I will do it. Maybe if someone is interested, you can contact me or wherever. And I don't know. I just hope that at some point this thing will just go away. We do need a good open source web store that is self-hostable, that has stable, that gets updates, and we just need to put an end to this. And I'm sorry for what happened to Pi64. I really am, because I do have a profound respect for the company. But this is not the way to go. I hope that they will learn the lesson. Hopefully, they will be the first to spring this whole idea of creating a new web store engine. They do have probably money to invest on open source projects, so maybe they want to have a look at it. I don't know. Anyway, let's move on to the next news of today. The Nvidia Rtx 3080 is out, and it's already sold out. Yeah, this was kind of a funny story. The Nvidia RTX 3080 has briefly been officially out. Unfortunately, the Nvidia's entire stock has been bought by bots that promptly placed auctions on eBay for these same cards with hugely inflated prices. All right. As for this incident, hopefully the situation will be sorted out with more stock and people will actually be able to buy the cards for their actual prices. And at this point, I'm not even sure that like those, those captchas or whatever, I'm not a robot things, I don't think they work, because I may think that Nvidia had some sort of system in place to prevent this from happening, or they just don't care and let it happen, because at the end of the day, all they care about is that people or bots, for what they care, buy their product. So I'm not really sure they care about who gets the products. And if there are some nasty people that want to profit from buying all of the cards, maybe they're fine with it. I don't know. It's just pretty sad to me, to be honest, that there are people that actually go all the way to buy the entire stock of Nvidia RTX 3080s to just resell them at inflated prices on eBay. That's just sick to me. I don't like this kind of behavior, to be honest. I don't think anyone does. And it's just something I can't believe that happens. but it does, apparently. As for the cards themselves, not too much to say here, to be honest. There are many videos out there of tech reviewers benchmarking these cards and talking about them. The benchmarks, of course, are out. And to summarize, the performance seems to be quite good, with approximately something like 20 FPS improvements. Again, approximately, depending on the game, of course, but about 20 FPS at 4K compared to the 2080 Ti. Oh, 20 FPS improvement, of course. It's not like they were running at 20 FPS. So if I don't know, whatever the 2080 Ti does in a particular game at 4K, the 3080 typically runs 20 FPS above that. So a pretty high boosting performance, also considering that this isn't even the highest end card that Nvidia has to release this year. They will release the 3090 down, I think, September 24th, something like that. And the other lower end cards are going forward. So the 3090 is like, will be the new performance king as far as GPUs go. But as far as the 3080 goes, it's already like the most powerful graphics card that you can probably buy this, or you cannot probably buy at this point, I guess. That's actually quite sad. I mean, having like the entire stock sold out to bots, I don't know. So let's have a look at the chat. Mauro Mazza, hi Mauro, says, the same people that wear a mask without covering their nose or just don't wear it at all. Are you talking about those people that, like those people commanding the bots that bought all of the 3080s? Yeah. I mean, yeah, those people are kind of, how can I say it in a family-friendly way? Those people, mean. Let's just say mean. Yeah, so those are mean people. Anyway, whatever. What can we do about it? I mean, at this point, if you wanted to buy 3080, I guess you just have to wait. Anyway, let's move on to the next news of today. Again, we're talking again about Nvidia here. Nvidia is inches close to acquiring ARM for $40 billion US. Insert Austin Powers quote here, whatever. So the acquisition of ARM Holdings, the company that has the intellectual property for the ARM architecture, by Nvidia from SoftBank Holdings, is closer than I expected. So apparently Nvidia is most likely very close to acquiring ARM for, again, $40 billion US. And that's kind of a lot of money, but still, ARM is one of the most successful architectures in the recent years. So, I mean, maybe 40 billion isn't all that much. Anyway, let's talk about this. If true, Nvidia will control probably the largest and surely the fastest growing CPU architecture at this current day and age. This raises a couple of concerns. Firstly, from China, of course. Since Nvidia is a US-based company, if this deal goes through and the US administration decides that Nvidia falls under the current trade law, Chinese tech companies, which greatly rely on the ARM architecture for many different kinds of products, from phones to tablets to IoT to even computers and servers, will not be able to use the architecture anymore because it's going to be a US technology. The second concern is that an architecture such as ARM, which is hugely popular and definitely growing in adoption by the day, could prove even more hostile than it currently is towards the open source world. And this is like a particular concern of mine, considering how Nvidia likes to close their products behind proprietary solutions and practically spits on anything that's standard to promote their own incompatible way of doing things. Just to make some examples, OpenCL versus CUDA, FreeSync versus G-Sync, or again, the dumb, different from anything else, and borked way that they implemented Wayland support in their Linux drivers. Yeah, I mean, Nvidia isn't known for being particularly friendly to the open source world, and the only reason they probably do have and do put some effort into the Linux drivers for their graphics cards is probably the CUDA, actually. And the fact that many servers and random farms and whatever do need CUDA and do run Linux, so that's probably most of the reason why they even care about Linux in the first place. But let's not also forget the fact that on ARM, the operating system that runs on most ARM devices is Linux, of course. We're talking about either Android smartphones or IoT devices. Both of these categories of devices run Linux. Still, if you're a consumer and you want to run your own distribution or whatever on an ARM device, you're not going to have a good time, because most of the time the drivers and all of the blobs that are needed to make the actual operating system run from upstream on ARM are not are made in such a way that they are not general purpose. They are not adaptable to anything else, and most importantly, that cannot be upstreamed. So my fear here is that the situation going forward, once Nvidia acquires ARM, is just going to get worse. And considering how ARM is getting more and more popular in the current market, I fear that this will that at some point it will just become impossible to run your own operating system on a piece of hardware that you buy. Let's have a look at the chat. Marius says companies like Apple could be beholden to Nvidia. Sounds like a conflict of interest. Yeah, this is another concern, because if you don't know, Apple is going to release their new Mac products with ARM CPUs. They call it Apple Silicon, but it's just, well, they are CPUs designed by Apple in some measure, and they use the ARM architecture. And since Apple and Nvidia are not in the best of relationships, this could go south a little bit. I don't know what will happen, to be honest, with this whole deal between Apple and Nvidia. I don't think that anything will. I think that if Nvidia actually goes through with this deal and acquires ARM, I don't think that there will be too much of a problem with Apple, because one, I think that Apple already has a license for ARM for their phones, so I don't think that they will need to acquire new ones. And besides, Apple is a big it's a big fish in the market, and if they just, I don't know, refuse to make business with Apple, they will just lose money. I don't think anything like that will happen. Mauro says RISC-V will never be mainstream soon enough. Yeah, I mean, RISC-V is kind of a pipe dream, I think, at this point, because it is going somewhere, but I don't think that it's going to have a real impact on the consumer market. I think it's going to be more effective in the embedded in the IoT space rather than the consumer market. Still, it's a very interesting architecture, and let's see where that goes. Kushal Pandya says Apple has had a better relationship with Nvidia, so it will be fun to see Apple being helpless now. I don't think anything will happen, to be honest, guys. They're two multi-billion-dollar companies, and it's not like they're children like playing around or whatever, and they will just do business without any. I don't think they will have any problems doing business with each other. And besides, at least for the first I don't know, 5 years or something, I'm pretty sure that ARM will still maintain some independence in a way before being totally acquired into Nvidia. That sort of thing takes some time. And again, they do have, they being Apple, they do already have a license for ARM, and I don't think they will need any other licenses. Mauro says, let's just all remember how Nvidia isn't really friendly with our beloved open source community. Yeah, that was most of my point. Kushal again says, it might be possible that Apple may start supporting Nvidia GPUs at best, because in the past they actively tried to not support Nvidia GPUs on Mac OS. They do have their own way of doing things, and Apple is a company that also has their own way of doing things. And when you have two stubborn companies doing their own thing and they have to work together, something will break at some point. That's kind of the obvious reaction here, because if Apple wants to do some things their own way, and Nvidia wants to do their things their own way. They just the two things just don't fit with each other, you know. And I think that's most of the problem with the situation between Nvidia and Apple. But I don't think that we'll see Nvidia GPUs on Macs anytime soon. And besides, I don't think that it makes sense for Apple at this point, also considering that they're migrating their whole architecture away from x86, so they're going with their own GPU inside their Apple Silicon whatever SoC. So they will probably have their own special Snowflake solution anyway. So I don't think that will happen. Anyway, let's move on. The last thing that I wanted to say about this story is that the deal has to be approved from 4 countries. US, UK, Japan, and finally China to be able to go through. And this is like the most important point here, because if one of those countries, okay, so I'm not really too much into this whatever company acquiring other company stuff, but for what I understand, if one of those countries doesn't approve the acquisition of ARM, the deal just doesn't go through, and then we're back to square one. Let's see where that goes. I think that Nvidia is really interested in buying ARM for their own agenda, and besides, it's just like a gold mine at this point, because everyone is using ARM, so they're just gonna make money from it, even if they don't do anything particular with it. Mauro again says, how about virtualization in Nvidia consumer products? They're still holding their position on making it life impossible to use a monster like the 3090 in a useful way. Yeah, because it's a gaming card. They want you to buy the Quadros or the Teslas, depending on what you need to do. That's part of their strategy. They sell the same silicon for hugely inflated prices, depending on what you want to do with it. And they limit the capabilities of the hardware via software. That's a bad practice, in my opinion, but that's most of what they do. I mean, the consumer market, the gaming GPU market isn't really truly a big market for Nvidia, even because, I mean, high-end solutions don't usually have huge adoptions. And if you look at something like the Steam surveys, you see most people have something like 1660s, and I don't think that Nvidia has huge profits on those, or something else like, I don't know, AMD 580s or something. I think that AMD has a more, as far as the gaming market goes at least, it's more competitive in the market, in general gaming market, because the prices are more competitive and the performance is actually pretty good as well. And I mean, no wonder that in consoles, even like the upcoming next gen consoles, you find AMD hardware, because they cost less, they perform pretty good, and that's what most people are fine with. You don't need to go with 39 or whatever if you want to game. You just need whatever runs your game. And I know that we gamers and hardware enthusiasts are fixated on things like high frame rates and high resolutions and whatever, but that's not how what most of the market is looking for. So I mean, I don't think that I think that this business model for Nvidia at this point at least is what moves them forward. Mauro again says, Gab, some speculation please. What do you think Nvidia wants to do with ARM? Just easy money or something, totally not open or free, interesting with co-processors, or boring consoles, or what? I mean, as far as consoles go, they do already have a deal with Nintendo. I mean, the Switch is basically an Nvidia Shield with, I mean, the Nintendo branding on top. And as far as passive income from just ARM licenses, that's another thing as well. As for anything specific, I don't really know what they do want to do with it, to be honest. Maybe they want to do SoCs. They want to just possibly they want to sell SoCs as complete computer solutions, kind of like they're doing with the Nvidia Shield lineup, but I'm not really sure about that. In the press, to the press, they're just talking about AI and the fact that if they will be able to acquire ARM, it will be like they will create a company for the AI generation or whatever. I don't know. Something about AI, something generic. I don't think that they are committing to anything specific here with this deal. Besides, even if they just do the passive income thing, yeah, it's not a bad deal, to be honest. 40 billion. If you consider in the long run how much money ARM will make from all the devices and all the companies that license ARM, I think it's a pretty good deal. Anyway, let's move on to the next news of today. Gnome 3.38 is out. And let's see what's new here. So it's a long-awaited release, as it's always the case. And like the first big change that I wanted to talk about is it's gone. Gone is the frequently used section in the app grid. So if you know Gnome, you open the app grid, the first thing you see are frequent apps, and you just never use that, and you have to press all apps on the bottom, and you have to see it to see all of your apps. And so they just removed the frequently used apps, as no one was apparently using them. And now icons can also be moved around in the app grid. So nice feature here, more user-friendly, I guess, and more, closer to what people expect from something like an app grid on, mobile phones, mobile devices, and whatever. Also, the app grid now resizes depending on the size of your screen. So that's also a pretty good thing. The built-in screen recording now uses Pipewire, so that'd be interesting to see how it performs and how it does. Gnome Maps, sound recorder, and the screenshot tool got a redesign. So, particularly for the screenshot tool, it was very long awaited. The previous one was pretty old. I don't think it was ever updated as far as design goes. There's also support for monitors with different refresh rates, and well, there was already, but it's been improved. I think that this is the release where we'll finally be able to use FreeSync on one monitor when you have multiple monitors that don't some of which don't support FreeSync. So that's a pretty nice option, pretty nice feature. I will definitely try it out once I get my hands on 3.38 and see how that does. Of course, this feature is obviously only available in Wayland for obvious architectural differences and problems with Xorg. And something about the next version is already out. The next version of Gnome will be called Gnome 40. Not 4.0, not 3.40, just 40. And this is a pretty interesting choice. It would be, the next version of Gnome would be the 40th release of Gnome. And they just took this opportunity as a good chance to change and simplify their current versioning scheme. I think it's not a terrible idea. Having like a single big number to represent your version is probably a good idea. Probably the fact that it's just 40, it's a big number, maybe it will get some people confused. I don't know about that. Anyway, and part of the reason why they changed their their versioning scheme is that they want to make the development of Gnome a little bit more detached from that of GTK. It's not to say that they're not going to use GTK. They do develop both, but they will try to make the two projects move forward more independently instead of being so closely attached together like they were up to this point. One of the aims for version 40 will also be to have a better extensions experience, so trying to reduce the breakage around extensions, which has been a huge problem with GNOME since forever. And they want to do that by, of course, making a more stable API, and that goes by itself, and by also improving documentation and providing better testing and continuous integration tooling for testing and making sure that extensions don't break on updates. So that's a very nice and interesting idea. Of course, you will be able to try out GNOME 3.38 in your favorite distribution once it's ready. The version 3.38 has already been tagged. I tried to update this morning and it still wasn't out for Arch. So I think in the coming days, or at worst weeks, we'll see it in Arch, and it will be the default desktop environment in Ubuntu 20.10 Groovy Gorilla. That's a great name, by the way. So you will be able to use it very soon. So let's move on to the next and final news of today. Slimbook launches the Essential lineup, 14 and 15-inch affordable Linux laptops. So these laptops are actually something that I was really looking forward to. Not these particular laptops, but affordable Linux laptops. That's something that we don't really have. We typically see these boutique ODMs like System 76, Star Labs, aiming to the mid to high range market. So having a cheaper, more affordable option for the lower end is actually something that I think has a really big value. Also considering how well Linux runs on lower end devices. Let's just say that. So what you're looking at right now is the Essential 15, and this little guy here is still the 15. Sorry, and this is the 14. So they look very similar. They're actually two different devices, but of course they are part of the same family. They do share some DNA between each other. Of course, one is 14-inch and the other is 15-inch. That is pretty obvious. And they are built using aluminum and ABS plastic. There are some plastic inserts, of course, but the build quality actually looks very good. And to be honest, they look incredibly sleek, particularly for the price. We'll get to the price later. They have huge trackpads, particularly the 14-inch. It looks ginormous. I love a big trackpad on my computer. Look at that. They have 1080p screens, and the hinge, as you can see from these photos, flips 180 degrees. Well, it doesn't flip. It just extends up to 180 degrees. This is one of those things that, like, you typically don't need your laptop to go all the way like this, but if you do need to go to a steeper angle, at least with this kind of device, you can do it. There are some cases where you actually need something like this. I know because the Star laptop actually does this thing, and it's been useful a couple of times. And besides, it's if you know that your screen won't break if you just turn it 180 degrees, it's just more peace of mind, you know. Let's move quickly to the chat here. Oh, there we go. Mauro says, long time no Gnome. How's Gnome resource consumption holding up these days? Well, I mean, Gnome is a little bit heavier compared to your typical Linux desktop environment. It's still around, I think, less than 1 gig. I think it depends heavily on the distribution, on which services you have active on your Gnome session, but it's still under 1 gig. It's around 700 megs, I think, with Nextcloud and whatever. I don't typically check how much RAM my system uses, also because let's always remember that RAM consumption on a system is also dependent on the amount of RAM that you have. If you have more memory, the system will try to allocate more memory to make things faster. So measuring the amount of RAM that's used on startup or whatever, I don't think that those are actually of any scientific value or whatever. And as far as the other question goes, noise, look at that RJ45 goodness. Yeah, having RJ45 jack is for many of us a necessity, and definitely for me it is. Are those Clevos too? Pretty sure they are. If not Clevos, some other Chinese OEM, whatever. It doesn't really matter too much, to be honest. They just look slick. Yeah, they do look kind of like Clevos. I wouldn't be surprised if they are. Also considering like this blue secondary layer here. It's typically something you see on Clevos. Let's move on with the specs. They are equipped with 10th gen i3, i5, or i7 CPUs, and the 14-inch option has a Intel Iris Plus graphics. So if that's any important to you, The 14-inch should have better graphics compared to the Intel UHD graphics that you will find in the 15-inch version. They will have up to 32 gigabytes of memory and up to 2 terabytes of NVMe storage. Pricing starts at, wait for it, $499 for the 14-inch version with an i3, 2 cores, 4 threads, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and a 250 gigabyte NVMe SSD. Not too shabby, not bad at all. The specs for $499 are actually pretty good, and it's euros, I think, because this is a Spanish company, so I think it's 499 euros. I gotta say, for the price, they look like great machines. They look like they will do their job well and hold to their designated objective, I guess. They're definitely a good option for anyone looking for a cheap PC, particularly this day and age, if you need to either work or attend classes remotely. Also, not a bad idea if you do have kids that are starting school soon, and definitely a lot better than a Chromebook, particularly at this price category. Anyway, guys, I think this is going to wrap it up for today's episode. Thank you very much for joining me live, as always, keeping the conversation going. So thank you again, guys, very much for watching. Leave a like if you like this video. Subscribe if you want more. Join the TechPills community at techpills.technology/community or using one of the QR codes on my left. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.